Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Find the clicker. So our whole panel today is basically going to talk about how at NCHS we are have been and are continuing to integrate survey panels into our work and talk a little bit about the methodological and practical challenges of doing that. So I'm going to start off talking about our research and development survey program, or RANS, which is how we all talked about it. Also, I'll give an introduction, and then I'll kind of talk a little about the various forms of research that we do using RANS, with a focus on the question evaluation research, because basically everyone else you're going to hear from up here today is going to focus on the estimation and Greek letters side of things. And then I'll talk a little bit about data dissemination that we've done with this program, and then with rapid surveys going forward. This slide is literally here for not this audience, but so the PowerPoint will stand on its own, but because we all know about commercial survey panels in this room. But what's important here is the motivation that we had when about a decade or so ago we started thinking about how to use panels in NCHS's work. NCHS as a government statistical agency, we have a lot of the data quality rules that we have to stick to. We have OMB clearance that we have to get through. But we saw the promise in using survey panels where we could basically get fast results for a pretty low cost, right? Compared to surveys like the National Health Interview Survey, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, or other kind of big surveys. But the trade-offs were then, potential data quality and some data control issues having to do with confidentiality. So we began the RANS program with the motivation to start exploring how we could use these and work through some of these issues while exploiting the positive sides. So the RANS program is run through our Division of Research and Methodology. It's an ongoing set of surveys. It is periodic, basically as I find money, we run more surveys, and as we have a need. We have three main goals that run that drive the program. So the first is research into panel properties. So basically, how can we at NCHS start researching what these panels do, what they look like, what the data looks like, so that we can eventually turn it into a program that will produce data, as Stephen will talk about in a few minutes. We also want to use these panels to supplement and develop new methods for question evaluation, which is my personal research focus. And then we have a third goal that has been tacked on is limited production of experimental or quasi-official estimates. So I'll go through all of these. This is a very long slide, but so far we have completed 7 rounds of RANS. Throughout the life of the program, we've used 2 different survey panel providers. So we started off the first 2 rounds. We used the Gallup panel, which is the RDD panel. And since RANS 3, we've been working with our friends at NORC. The focus of each round changes. This isn't a repeated measurement kind of thing. We do have some variables that we keep steady across all the rounds that we use for calibration of the weights, which is ULA we'll get more into. But as partners come to us with topics, we include those or take them away from every round. We also completed 3 special rounds during the pandemic. Basically, we were one of the only survey systems that could collect fast data at NCHS during the pandemic, and we somehow got OMB permission to collect and release those data. And that's actually the first instance that we know of that OMB allowed a federal statistical agency to release data or estimates using a commercial web panel. So let me get in a little bit into the research that we've done. So in the research into the panel properties, we're mostly concerned with the statistical properties of commercial surveys. So basically, we're focusing on the, we all know this, but the right-hand side, the representation side of total survey error, right? So, we're interested in coverage error. Obviously, and we've already heard, and we will hear throughout the next day and a half, right? One of the issues with panels is who joins a panel, right? Also looking at non-response error. This also gets into kind of differential non-response by mode. We use, as I said, the Amerispeak panel, which does have a phone and web component. So, how does that multi-mode aspect impact response? The big focus of our research is in this last point, which is adjustment error. Basically our question is, can we make this panel data look like data from, say, the National Health Interview Survey? That is kind of our motivating, driving question on the statistical research side. And throughout the life of the program, we've evaluated a bunch of approaches, propensity score, calibrated weighting, and some other speakers will get more into that. The other side of the house is question evaluation research. So we wanted to be able to use these panels to basically supplement what we typically do just through cognitive interviewing. So since we started the RANDS program about a decade ago, we have now kind of integrated into our workflow using these web surveys, web or commercial panel surveys, to expand our cognitive interviewing results, and also to develop new methods for mixed method evaluation that really, weren't possible before we had access to this research. So I'm just going to give one example of this kind of evaluation research, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. When we did the COVID rounds, started the COVID rounds of RANDS, we knew we wanted to ask about telemedicine. There hadn't been actually any at NCHS, any good questions that had been administered in other surveys about telemedicine and whether or not people had access to it. And I'm sorry, these are so small, but I can't even read them over here. So when we were designing this survey, we designed this questionnaire in basically a week and a half, and we had to take all this stakeholder consultation, and we ended up with what isn't a great question. In the last 2 months, has your provider offered you an appointment with a doctor, nurse, or other health professional by video or phone? We didn't love the question, but we were kind of required to use that particular wording. We were worried about it, but we also didn't have time to do cognitive interviewing, which is what we would normally do. And so we added an open-ended web probe directly following this question on the RAND survey. How do you know whether your provider offered telemedicine or not? So after the first round of this RANDS COVID survey, with this probe, we ended up with 10,000-ish non-blank responses that then we had to go code. I had a team of grad students, thank God, and they hand coded it. We looked at the constructs that were captured, and we looked at potential cases of measurement error, of response error. Actually, since we began that work, we in our division have come up with basically a machine learning approach to try to make this a little better, not necessarily for coding constructs, but for data cleaning and getting rid of missing data. And we actually just released the model called SANS. It's on the NCHS website. So this is a detector for non-response, so non-blank non-response. So I invite everyone to take a look at that. Okay, so basically, when we finally got those coded responses, we found two major patterns of interpretation. Some people thought that question was asking about accessibility of telemedicine, which is what we wanted. But a large proportion of the responses, 15%, were thinking the question had to do with whether or not they use telemedicine. This is not what we were going for. This is potential response error. And so in the next round, we included this probe instead. How do you know whether your provider offers telemedicine or not? And what we're really interested in is this response option here. We don't know whether the provider offers this. So basically, if somebody said no, and then they say, well, we don't know whether they offer it, that's not good, right? And so what we ended up with was of the no responses to the actual telemedicine availability question, 54% of people indicated that they didn't know whether or not their provider offered telemedicine. So that's those are wrong, right? That's potential of false negative responses. Wrong way. So what we did then in our third round of the survey was we did a split sample design where we had the initial question that we did in the first 2 rounds on the left, and the other half of the sample received a better question, we think. Does this provider offer telephone or video appointments so you don't have to physically visit the office or facility? And if we just look at the prevalence of those, we can see a massive change, a difference between those measures. So there was some sort of measurement error going on. And so that's just an example of how we've used this program to do some measurement error work. I'll conclude by just saying that we've also done some public estimates. As I said, during the COVID rounds, we were given permission to produce tables on 3 topics. And that data is available still on the NCHS website. Additionally, we have, of all of our rounds, we provide public use files, so people can go and play with all these data. This is designed to be a methodological resource, so the data is there for people to play with and do what you want. Thank you so much.